for the elite pilots of the Luftwaffe, who styled themselves as unchallenged rulers of Europe's airspace. The debut of the American P-47 Thunderbolt was pure ridicule. They dubbed it a fliegende Milchflasche, a soaring milk bottle. As the hefty aircraft first appeared over France during the spring of 1943, German aviators found its awkward, swollen silhouette impossible to take seriously, bursting into mockery. The beast tipped the scales at nearly 8 tons when fully equipped, almost twice the weight of their agile Focke-Wulf 190s. In their eyes, this lumbering sky giant promised to be a sluggish target, ripe for swift destruction. A glaring example of what they dismissed as rough-hewn Yankee design. As one Luftwaffe ace confessed afterward, "Our amusement proved a grave error." That mockery faded fast amid a hail of firepower, once they realized the milk bottle brimmed with 8 50-caliber machine guns, a cutting-edge power plant that ruled the upper reaches of the atmosphere, and an resilience that bordered on the miraculous. They jeered at it relentlessly, even as it began methodically clearing them from the heavens. By the opening months of 1943, the aerial battles across Europe unfolded like a deadly game of strategy, with the German Luftwaffe holding the role of supreme tacticians. Their aircraft served as razor-sharp tools of accuracy and velocity, having commanded the air domain for an extended period. Stepping into this realm of lethal virtuosos arrived the U.S. contender, the Republic P-47 Thunderbolt. At initial sight, it appeared an utter failure. Doubt wasn't limited to the adversaries either. U.S. flyers, often straight from training programs, stared at the P-47 in shock upon first encounter. When initial units reached squadrons in England, such as the renowned 4th and 78th, the response rang with incredulity. Plenty of these airmen had previously handled the sleek British Spitfire, a purebred marvel of agility. The P-47 struck them instead as a cumbersome hauler. Though its cabin offered generous room, a minor plus in such a ponderous machine, it came across as lethargic and unwieldy. Flyers took to calling it the Jug, evoking the shape of an everyday milk jug. The moniker endured, eventually gaining a new layer as an abbreviation for Juggernaut. Behind the aircraft's creation stood Alexander Kartveli, a gifted engineer from Georgia. The United States Army Air Corps assigned Alexander Kartveli the challenge of developing an advanced interceptor capable of challenging the Luftwaffe's top fighters. His approach proved unconventional. Rather than focusing on a nimble pursuit plane, Kartveli centered the whole design on the strongest power plant available, the formidable 18-cylinder Pratt & Whitney R2800 Double Wasp. In order to integrate everything effectively, he incorporated an innovative turbo-supercharger setup that demanded a vastly oversized fuselage. During the unveiling of his concept, Kartveli himself is said to have remarked that it would resemble a dinosaur, yet one with elegant lines. And indeed, it turned out to be just that. The P-47 carried a weight of almost 10,000 pounds in its unloaded state. When fully equipped, it exceeded 17,000 pounds on the scales. By way of contrast, the WWII, one of its primary adversaries, weighed under 9,000 pounds, even when completely armed. Such staggering mass brought about prompt and concerning repercussions. The P-47 Thunderbolt struggled with a sluggish rate of ascent. During tight, circling aerial battles, it found itself utterly inferior. Launching from the runway demanded an eternity, requiring expansive strips that forward bases in England often couldn't provide. Its initial foray into combat on April 8, 1943, turned into a catastrophe. An escort mission across France got aborted due to faulty American communication systems, a mortifying reversal that compelled the whole squadron to swap in British equipment. Once actual confrontations with adversaries occurred, the outcomes proved bleak. Over the opening 2 months, these P-47s conducted more than 2,000 sorties, yet they only downed 10 enemy aircraft while suffering 18 losses themselves. Pilots from the Luftwaffe quickly mastered the strategy. Lure the lumbering U.S. powerhouse into a twisting skirmish at low levels, and victory came effortlessly. What they dubbed the flying milk bottle appeared exactly as anticipated, a bloated, ineffective dud. Doubts even crept in among the U.S. aviators, particularly those seasoned members of the 4th Fighter Group who longed for their nimble Spitfires. As the Germans observed this colossal arrival, arrogance rather than dread filled their ranks. They viewed it as a machine designed for raw power alone, devoid of the subtle maneuvering skills they held dear. To them, it confirmed the American notion that sheer size trumped all, a mindset destined for downfall. In the bustling mess halls of the Luftwaffe, the pilots' chuckles rang true. They had tangled with the Allies' finest machines, and the P-47 clearly didn't measure up. Yet, what escaped their notice was that this fighter hadn't been built for the dogfights they knew so well. Instead, it heralded an entirely different style of aerial combat, and the punchline of their amusement, they would learn all too quickly, targeted them directly. So, in what way had the Germans misjudged so badly? They evaluated the Thunderbolt through the lens of their familiar tactics, overlooking the innovative core that truly defined it. The P-47's true strengths lay not in nimble maneuvers, but in its powerhouse motor and the sophisticated setup that sustained it, enabling supremacy in the realm that counted above all, the icy, sparse atmosphere beyond 25,000 feet. At the heart of it all stood the engine proper, the Pratt & Whitney R2800 Double Wasp. Far more than a mere power plant, this marvel delivered 2,000 horsepower and could surge past 2,800 with the aid of water injection. To put it in perspective, even the outstanding power unit in the Bf-109 generated only about 1,400 to 1,800 horsepower. In essence, the R2800 ranked among the war's mightiest radial piston engines. That very radial configuration also explained the P-47's legendary durability. In contrast to the liquid-cooled straight-line designs powering the Spitfire or the Bf-109, a radial setup positioned its cylinders in a circular array. Sure, this arrangement increased aerodynamic resistance, contributing to the aircraft's robust, hefty profile, but it eliminated the delicate network of pipes that shuttled essential coolant through vulnerable channels. Luftwaffe aviators were accustomed to their gunfire tearing into an opponent's motor, rupturing a coolant conduit, and sending the crippled aircraft plummeting earthward. Yet the R2800 stood apart as a beast of its own kind. With its air-cooling design and imposing bulk, it endured extraordinary levels of damage without faltering. Anecdotes abound of P-47s limping back to base after losing whole cylinders to enemy fire, their power plants persisting in defiant operation. Still, raw horsepower by itself fell short of the mark. As elevation soared, the atmosphere thinned out, depriving engines of vital oxygen. Typical pursuit aircraft relied on a supercharger linked through gears and turned by the engine's crankshaft. While effective to a point, this setup acted like a drain on resources, siphoning away output from the motor, and its efficiency plunged sharply in the upper reaches of the sky. This is where the P-47 truly unveiled its hidden edge, the General Electric turbo-supercharger. Rather than drawing drive from the engine directly, it harnessed the scorching exhaust gases, purely wasted heat, to generate its force. An intricate web of piping twisted from the engine, running along the aircraft's underside to a turbine nestled in the tail section. There, the gases propelled the turbine to whirl a compressor beyond 20,000 revolutions per minute, drawing in the sparse, chilly air, compressing it under pressure, and forcing it forcefully into the cylinders. The outcome bordered on the extraordinary, as German interceptors, burdened by their engine-linked superchargers, started to falter for breath past 25,000 feet. The Thunderbolt's R-2800 reached peak performance. Thanks to the turbo, the aircraft held on to its formidable thrust clear up to 30,000 feet and higher still. High in the domain of the heavy bombers it had been engineered to escort, the awkward Jug morphed into a sleek champion. It surged with speed, handled with precision, and brimmed with vitality that left its Luftwaffe foes outclassed. The elite German pilots found themselves pulled into unfamiliar territory, where their familiar superiorities vanished entirely. Thus, the bulbous milk bottle shape began to expose its initial, fearsome capability. The P-47 Thunderbolt wasn't designed for graceful maneuvers in the skies. Instead, it was engineered to dominate in brutal conditions where survival itself was a challenge for most machines. If its powerful engine served as the aircraft's vital core, then its weaponry embodied its true essence. Pilots from the Luftwaffe, accustomed to a more equilibrium-based approach that balanced guns with limited rounds, were on the verge of encountering a fighter rooted in a distinctly U.S. doctrine: raw, unrelenting barrages of destruction. Equipped with 8 50-caliber M2 Browning machine guns, 4 embedded in each wing, the Thunderbolt represented far more than a simple array of weapons. It functioned like a soaring field of cannons. When every barrel fired in unison, the plane could deliver more than 100 projectiles each second. Those who flew it rarely spoke of simply shooting. They evoked images of hurling forward an impenetrable barrier of bullets. The sheer quantity of ammunition matched this intensity, with capacity for as many as 4,000 rounds on board. In comparison, a Bf-109 might deplete its supply after only brief salvos. A pilot in a Thunderbolt, however, had the option to sustain trigger pressure for almost 30 seconds without pause. Precision aiming wasn't essential. Positioning the foe anywhere within view allowed the torrent of shots to handle the outcome. The machine guns were positioned to focus their paths at a precise range, typically about 300 yards. Whatever lay within that deadly overlap, be it a wing, the pilot's enclosure, or the power plant, faced total obliteration. Those robust, fast-moving 50-caliber projectiles had the force to penetrate protective plating and demolish engine components. A top Luftwaffe expert, Günther Rahl, once likened confronting such might to a methodical slaughter by machinery. This transformed aerial battles from elegant tests of expertise into episodes of mechanical devastation. All that lethal power rested upon a structure remarkably resilient to damage. Undeniably, the P-47 stood among the most indestructible aircraft in history. Its pilot's compartment resembled an armored enclosure, thick with protective steel. The air-cooled radial power plant as noted earlier, endured strikes that would instantly destroy a liquid-cooled counterpart. Moreover, the plane's imposing dimensions often permitted incoming fire to traverse harmlessly, sparing critical elements. Tales of the Thunderbolt's endurance have become the stuff of aviation legend. Among the most renowned accounts stands that of Major Robert S. Johnson. During an encounter on June 26, 1943, his P-47 fell under a sudden attack, suffering damage from no fewer than 21 cannon shells, along with countless machine gun bullets. The cockpit cover lay in fragments, flames engulfed the aircraft, and Johnson himself bore injuries. Attempting an escape by parachute proved futile, as the ruined canopy jammed fast, confining him within the inferno-ravaged fuselage. In a frantic plunge, the blaze astonishingly extinguished itself. Nursing his crippled machine toward the English Channel, he drew the attention of a solitary FW-190, intent on finishing him off. With no means to retaliate, Johnson steeled himself for what seemed inevitable doom. The adversary circled repeatedly, unleashing a barrage on the vulnerable Thunderbolt. When his rounds ran dry at last, the German eased in parallel to the battered P-47. Gazing over at Johnson, he wagged his wings in a gesture of respect toward what he presumed was a fallen adversary, then veered away toward his own lines. Against all odds, Johnson guided that perforated hulk, riddled with more than 200 perforations, safely back to his airfield. Such an episode marked the Thunderbolt's second profound lesson. Far beyond a mere power plant, it embodied an impregnable bastion. Airmen of the Luftwaffe, accustomed to adversaries shattering under fire, now confronted a foe that defiantly endured. They would empty their weapons into the massive U.S. pursuit plane, only to stare in astonishment as it pressed onward unyieldingly. As the celebrated Luftwaffe pilot Heinz Baer once remarked, the P-47 possessed a remarkable capacity to withstand tremendous volumes of gunfire. The mirth had vanished entirely. What lingered instead was an intensifying wave of apprehension. They confronted a beast of a machine. The P-47 stood as an instrument of destruction, poised only for the proper strategies to unlock its potential. Initial stumbles arose from aviators attempting to play by the Luftwaffe's rules. A fatal miscalculation. Yet a fresh cadre of astute leaders, such as Hubert Zemke from the 56th Fighter Group, understood that one shouldn't force a brawny prize fighter into a graceful waltz. Instead, harness that raw strength. The solution emerged as a method as ruthless as the aircraft it commanded. Boom and zoom. Its principles were straightforward. Steer clear of twisting engagements under any circumstances. Rather, pilots in P-47s leveraged the exceptional high-altitude capabilities of their power plants to ascend beyond the enemy formations. Positioned at elevations of 30,000 feet or more, they would survey the expanse beneath for signs of German interceptors. Upon detecting a quarry, they would roll over and plunge downward. During such descents, the P-47 proved invincible. The very heft that hindered it in ascents transformed into its paramount advantage. With gravity seizing the 8-ton behemoth, it hurled the plane earthward in a fearsome rush. The Thunderbolt attained velocities in these plunges capable of shredding the wings from rival planes surging beyond 500 miles per hour. At such paces, it morphed into a precision projectile. The assault unfolded with ruthless efficiency. A P-47 would hurtle from the glare of the sun, its prey frequently oblivious, until bursts of tracer fire shattered the calm. The aviator enjoyed mere moments to align the sights, press the firing button, and deliver a torrent of destruction. Long before the foe could respond, the Thunderbolt streaked by, capitalizing on its blistering momentum to surge upward once again, repositioning for the next strike. Instead of a chivalrous clash or elegant maneuver, it amounted to a swift, lethal strike at full throttle. Such a strategic evolution elevated the P-47's role, positioning it as the top guardian for the 8th Air Force's B-17s and B-24s. At this point, Luftwaffe pilots faced the daunting task of battling past a swarm of circling Thunderbolts overhead, merely to approach the vulnerable bomber formations. Come the end of 1943, assessments from German spies, once quick to underrate the P-47, now labeled it a serious menace. Meanwhile, the plane underwent its own refinements. Among the key enhancements stood the introduction of the bubble canopy. The earlier Razorback configuration suffered from a massive rearward blind area, proving a deadly vulnerability. In contrast, the sleek teardrop enclosure offered the aviator a clear, all-around panorama spanning 360 degrees. Equally transformative proved the adoption of a fresh paddle-style propeller. With broader surfaces that gripped the atmosphere more forcefully, it boosted the P-47's launch performance, speed buildup, and above all, its climbing capability in a striking fashion. What the adversaries had previously ridiculed as a lumbering jug was suddenly keeping pace with them in a sense. Armed with these advancements, the P-47 emerged as a genuinely intimidating combat machine. Its enhanced sightlines and vertical agility now paired seamlessly with the aircraft's inherent velocity, armament, and resilience. Gone were the times when pilots mocked the airborne milk jug, now just a sour echo from the past. These days, whenever Luftwaffe airmen glanced skyward and spotted those heavy outlines wheeling overhead at great heights, a chill of dread tightened in their guts. Dominion over the heavens had slipped from their grasp. With the arrival of 1944, fresh P-51 Mustangs started reaching European bases. Thanks to its exceptional endurance, the Mustang proved ideal for shielding bombers on round-trip missions straight to Berlin. Such a development could have spelled the end for a more ordinary plane. Yet for the Thunderbolt, it marked the start of a fresh chapter, a redefined purpose that would let loose its destructive prowess with intensified savagery. This shift turned it into a fighter bomber, what the Germans, gripped by horror, dubbed the Jabo. The P-47's robust power plant enabled it to haul an immense cargo, including as much as 2,500 pounds of explosives, a burden comparable to that of certain light bombers, along with provision for up to 10 5-inch high-velocity rockets. What had once been a predator of the upper skies now became a grim reaper skimming the earth. Ahead of D-Day, the Allies' aerial forces bore the mission of shattering the Nazi military apparatus, and the P-47 stood out as the ideal instrument for that task. The consequences proved devastating. Skimming just above the treetops, P-47s swept through the French countryside, stalking any sign of activity. They zeroed in on the vital lifelines of the German forces, rail lines, storage sites for supplies, and columns of soldiers on the move. A squadron of Thunderbolts might materialize out of nowhere in mere moments, their 50-caliber guns blazing, shattering lines of supply vehicles into a series of fiery ruins with their machine guns. Rockets from these aircraft had the power to annihilate an armored vehicle completely. Explosives dropped by them were capable of pockmarking runways with deep craters. During these ground strike missions, the renowned durability of the P-47 proved to be its greatest strength. Executing strikes at treetop height carried immense peril, as pilots plunged straight into a hailstorm of anti-aircraft fire from below. Yet the Thunderbolt's sturdy construction and radial air-cooled power plant allowed them to endure the punishment and press on. These fighters frequently limped back to their airfields, peppered with bullet holes and belching fumes, but with their aviators still intact. In the words of a well-known pilot's quip, no P-47 flyer would choose to parachute out when they could instead make a wheels-up landing. During the Normandy invasion on D-Day, and throughout the savage months that ensued, the P-47 turned into the ultimate terror for Wehrmacht infantrymen. Crews in German panzers, formerly dominant on the field of battle, found themselves frozen in hesitation. Any advance in broad daylight now meant courting a rapid and lethal assault from the skies. That signature growl from the R-2800 power plant evolved into an ominous harbinger of destruction, sparking a mindset of dread in the ranks of the enemy forces called Jabo fever. The moment a Thunderbolt's engine noise pierced the air, troops would hurl themselves to the ground, aware that devastation loomed just moments hence. The figures are astonishing. Between the Normandy landings and the final Allied victory in Europe, pilots flying the P-47 racked up claims for obliterating 86,000 rail cars, 9,000 engines pulling trains, 6,000 tanks and other armored units, along with 68,000 transport trucks. Through relentless operations, they tore apart the Wehrmacht's supply system, leaving ground forces critically short of essentials. Even Field Marshal Gerd von Rundstedt, who commanded German forces in the West, expressed deep frustration over how Allied aviation dominance, driven by the low-level fighter bombers known as Jabos, rendered large-scale redeployments of soldiers utterly unfeasible. What started as a punchline had evolved into an unstoppable force. At its heart, the triumph of the P-47 transcended mere engineering or battlefield maneuvers. It embodied a profound confrontation between contrasting visions of warfare. On one side stood the German strategy, centered on elite, one-of-a-kind experts who were impossible to replace. Opposing it was the U.S. method, which harnessed mass production to deliver sheer, insurmountable might. No aircraft better represented this mindset than the Thunderbolt. The volume of P-47s manufactured defies easy grasp. From 1941 through 1945, the team at Republic Aviation delivered more than 15,600 of them. During the height of output, an additional fighter emerged from production every single hour. This flood of machinery represented a manufacturing wave that the Axis industrial base had no hope of matching. As Nazi plants labored amid non-stop raids to assemble just a couple hundred aircraft per month, the United States smothered the enemy with a torrent of metal. Such extraordinary efficiency permeated the design of the aircraft in all its aspects. More than 125,000 R-2800 engines rolled off production lines, crafted not only by Pratt & Whitney, but also by automotive powerhouses such as Ford and Chevrolet. This widespread manufacturing guaranteed an endless stream of aircraft and replacement components. A battle-damaged P-47 could typically undergo repairs and return to the skies within mere days. In comparison, when a German fighter went down, securing a substitute aircraft proved unreliable, and the death of its aviator represented a devastating setback. The aviators themselves embodied yet another facet of this massive factory-like strategy. As the Luftwaffe's pilot preparation efforts faltered amid fuel scarcities and unending engagements, the U.S. Army Air Forces established an expansive system for training recruits. Prior to facing enemy fire, a U.S. flyer accumulated hundreds of hours in the cockpit under guided instruction. By the war's closing stages, however, a fresh Luftwaffe pilot counted himself fortunate with just 100 hours of accumulated flying experience before plunging into the fray. The United States did not merely produce superior numbers of aircraft, it also generated vast numbers of skilled pilots, approaching 200,000 in total. Though the demise of any individual pilot remained a profound sorrow, it functioned as an interchangeable element within an enormous operational framework. Rounding out this dominance was the realm of supply chains. Despite its voracious appetite for fuel, the P-47 benefited from America's unparalleled manufacturing prowess, which delivered high-octane gasoline, munitions, and all necessary provisions in what appeared to be boundless volumes. This conflict was one the Luftwaffe stood no chance of prevailing in. Their adversaries extended far beyond the P-47 itself. They confronted the full productive force of the United States. The P-47 served as the hardened point of an unstoppable colossus, pulverizing the Luftwaffe through unyielding, overwhelming erosion. If this in-depth exploration of one of World War II's while most iconic fighters captured your interest, the video's creators encourage you to like it and subscribe for more. They offer a wealth of additional tales about remarkable aircraft and the courageous individuals who piloted them, ensuring you stay engaged with every installment. By the spring of 1945, specifically in May, the Republic P-47 Thunderbolt had etched itself indelibly into the annals of history. What began as ridicule, derided as a lumbering milk can in the air, a punchline of sorts, transformed into an enduring symbol of prowess. As the conflict drew to a close, it boasted a confirmed combat record exceeding 4 enemy kills for every one of its own losses, with more than 500,000 sorties completed, and countless adversaries felled. Thousands of hostile planes and tens of thousands of ground targets obliterated. The arc of its rise, from overlooked contender to unchallenged force, highlighted a tale of shrewd evolution, capitalizing fiercely on its inherent advantages. This narrative embodied breakthroughs in engineering, channeling the might of a groundbreaking power plant to master the rarefied heights of aerial combat. More fundamentally, though, it reflected a doctrine of manufacturing, demonstrating that victory in warfare stems not solely from strategic genius, but from the unyielding sheer volume of industrialized output. The most poignant validation arrived from Adolf Galland, the Luftwaffe's commander of fighter forces. Queried on the true downfall of Germany's air arm, he bypassed any particular engagement. Instead, he evoked the vast expanse above his homeland, shrouded in clouds of U.S. interceptors that pursued and decimated his aviators without mercy. In that supremacy, the P-47 served as the merciless enforcer. Its influence endures to this day. The foundational concept behind the P-47, a rugged, heavily weaponized fighter crafted for close air support to infantry, finds its modern echo in the Fairchild Republic A-10 Thunderbolt Settertridant. Widely recognized as the Warthog, the P-47's chronicle represents an archetypal turnaround in destiny. It commences amid mockery and concludes amid dread. It originates as a jest and culminates as an unstoppable behemoth.